What do a cozy fantasy about magical baking, a mind-bending space opera about necromancers, and a high seas adventure about a retired pirate have in common? They're all books that are on my Our Fantasy bingo card. I've been tackling one of the most popular reading challenges in the sci-fi fantasy horror community. That's the Our Fantasy Bingo. I'm going to talk about what I've read, what I plan to read, and the squares that I need your help on. So whether you're working on your own card or you're just here for some recommendations, join me while I update you on my progress. So if you don't know, the Our Fantasy Bingo card runs from April 1st until March 31st. So this one started April 1st of 2025 and it runs until March 31st, 2025. And September is about halfway through, so that's why we're checking in now. There are some rules. The point of the Our Fantasy Bingo card is to have a wide variety, to expand your reading, and to try some new things in the sci-fi fantasy realm. You can only have one reread. One book equals one prompt. You can't read a book that fulfills multiple squares, basically. You can't have any repeating authors, except for the short story card. So if you read an author in the short story card, you can repeat that author elsewhere. There is hero mode, which means I believe it means you're posting on all the books that you read, you're reviewing them on Reddit. But the one that I'm trying to tackle is hard mode, although I'm not doing it for every square. Hard mode is basically they add an additional component to the prompt that's supposed to up the ante. And then if you fulfill everything, if you read 25 new fantasy books by, 24 or 25 new authors, then you get some flair next to your little logo in Reddit. And if you do it multiple times, then I think they start to add numbers and things like that. So this is my first year doing it because I've joined the bookish community and I thought it would be a fun reading challenge to try. So I'm gonna put my bingo card right here and we're gonna go through it row by row. I'm gonna tell you my thoughts on the books I have read and what I plan to read. And then, as I mentioned, there is some squares that are giving me some trouble that I have no idea what I'm gonna do. First square, first row is Knights and Paladins. This is one of the protagonists has to be a knight or a paladin, which is a very similar thing. And hard mode is that the character has an oath or a promise that they have to fulfill. For this, I read T. Kingfisher's Paladin's Strength. I did read Paladin's Grace first, but in Paladin's Strength, it meets the criteria for hard mode because the main character in it is fulfilling an oath. I really enjoyed this. I like all of T. Kingfisher's books so far. This is a witty, heartfelt fantasy that blends adventure, romance, humor, and a lot of emotional depth. So this follows a retired paladin and a mysterious nun on a quest filled with monsters, secrets, and a slow burn attraction. So this book does have some spice, but T. Kingfisher does it very eloquently, I would say. Next row, the next prompt that I fulfilled was Impossible Places. Read a book set in a location that would break a physicist. The geometry, non-Euclidean. The volume, bigger on the inside. The direction, merely a suggestion. And then to meet hard mode for this, at least 50% of the book has to take place in the impossible place. So I read a BookTube darling for this, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. However, this one didn't really work for me. It's an atmospheric and mysterious novel set in a labyrinthine house filled with statues and endless halls. The world was intriguing and very vividly drawn, but I found myself wishing for a little bit more plot and a lot more concrete answers. I need to know what's going on in my books. So ultimately, it was a little too dreamlike for me, but I hope that those of you out there that like the more atmospheric books, you should definitely try it because the writing is very beautiful. Next up, I read A Book in Parts. So this is read a book that is separated into large sections within the main text. This can include things like acts, parts, days, years, etc. It just has to be more than just chapter breaks. To meet hard mode criteria for this, it has to have 4 or more parts. I read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, which I loved. So this is a sharp, wildly inventive mix of science fiction, mystery, and necromancy, and it kept me hooked from start to finish. So here we have an eccentric cast of characters. There's a huge cast of characters, and they were funny and dark and endearing, and it just brought so much energy and humor to this twisted, puzzle-filled plot that I was hooked from the beginning to the end, and I'm really excited to see where the series goes. I'm already reading Harrow the Ninth, which is a very different book, but I'm still enjoying it. Gods and Pantheons. So read a book that is featuring divine beings, and hard mode means that has multiple pantheons that are involved. For this, I read a novella called A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, which I absolutely adored. So this is a cozy, hopeful story full of thought-provoking reflections on purpose, technology, and our relationship with nature as humans. So despite its short length, because it was a novella, it just created a world that was inviting and inspiring and very profound. There was a lot of amazing quotes from just this little short book. My next square that I fulfilled is a book club or read-along book. So read a book that was or is officially a group reading on Our Fantasy. So I read a current read-along book. I believe it was either the June or the July FIF reading club book. The hard mode is that you read and participate in a book club, an Our Fantasy book club or read-along during that year. And I read The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar. This is the same author that co-wrote This Is How You Lose the Time War. And I was a little apprehensive because I did not enjoy This Is How You Lose the Time War, but I really enjoyed this one. This was another short novella. It's a lyrical, enchanting tale that weaves magic seamlessly into the storytelling. The prose were really poetic and immersive, and the audiobook really added a lot to this experience because there was a lot of music in this that was important to the magic in this story. And the audiobook incorporated the music and the instruments in it. So I really felt transported into the book. Next row, read a book with a parent protagonist. The main character has a child to care for. The child does not have to be their biological child. They don't have to be biologically related. Hard mode is the child is also a major character in the story. As you may have seen in a previous video, I read The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Chakrabarti with my mom, and this is about a retired pirate who is a mother. However, her daughter is not one of the main characters in the story, so this doesn't fulfill hard mode. But it's a thrilling, witty tale told through a unique interview style. That was one of my favorite things about the book, that pulled you right into the adventure. It had a really diverse cast that brought humor and heart and wisdom and just made the whole journey of the book feel like you were along on the adventure with them. The next book on this row is an epistolary book. So this book must prominently feature any of the following: a diary, a journal entry, letters, messages, newspaper clippings, transcripts, etc. Hard mode would be the book is told entirely in the epistolary form. It was a new read for me, but I did some rereads before it. So I read Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett, and if you're familiar with those books, they are written entirely through Emily's journal entries, her scholarly journal entries, but they don't feel like scholarly journal entries when you're reading them. Fawcett does a really good job of making you feel like you're reading a story. So this continues the charming, whimsical, scholarly writing style that made all of the other books so enjoyable for me. It did have the same like cozy, folkloric Irish fairy feel to it, but I wasn't entirely sure what the larger purpose of this book was in the overall series. So I didn't enjoy it as much as some of the other ones, but it was still an enjoyable read. If you liked the other ones, you'll like this one, I would say. Next from this row, it had to be a book published in 2025. This was not difficult for me because I definitely had a lot of new books that I wanted to read. Hard mode is that it was also a debut author for this novel. I read Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. Unfortunately, this just didn't work for me. It read like a YA novel where they added cursing and some romantic spice to it just to call it adult. But everything, the characters felt very surface level to me, and it made it really hard for me to visualize and connect with anyone in the story. I called a lot of the twists ahead of time, so that didn't even really hold me in. I was also very bothered by their use of infection in the story, and that was probably more of a personal thing for me, but it frustrated me to the point that I don't actually think I'm gonna continue the series. That was not a debut novel by Devney Perry, so it did not count for hard mode. There might be some other books that I read in the future that I'll swap out for this one that could count for hard mode. There's a lot of new books this year that I'm reading. Next row, row 4, biopunk. Read a book that focuses on biological technology. I love this word biopunk. It's like my favorite thing. So the focus is on biotechnology and or its consequences. Hard mode is that there is no electricity-based technology in this world. So for this, I read Robert Jackson Bennett's The Shadow of the Leviathan books, so A Tainted Cup and A Drop of Corruption. These had a brilliant blend of inventive sci-fi world building and clever twisty Sherlock Holmes kind of mystery. The mystery cases, the murders kept me hooked from the beginning, and really it's the dynamic between Anna and Din, the two main characters, just kept me entertained. They're sharp, they're witty, they keep me coming back for more. All right, next one. This one was hard to find some for, so elves and or dwarves. So read a book that features the classic fantasy archetype of elves or dwarves and or dwarves. They do not have to fit the classic tropes, but they must be either named as elves or dwarves and be easily identified as such. Hard mode is the main character is an elf or a dwarf. So not fae, not fairy, which is the big popular thing right now, specifically elves. And then dwarves are also not, outside of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which I've read, dwarves are not really main characters in a lot of books. I did find A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by Jay Penner for this. However, it didn't land for me. The story felt really thin, like it needed another 100 pages or so. It didn't really develop. It was almost too cozy for me. It didn't really develop enough that I felt like I could hold on. And I felt like the female main character was a little too whiny and complainy for the struggles that she was going through. So I didn't feel a connection between her and the male lead, which is disappointing because it's about a magical baking competition. And I love a book with a good baking competition in it. So I've read some romance books where that really was a fun trope for me. So the main character, the male main character was an elf, and then there was like a best friend of hers that was also a dwarf. It is a series. If you like the magical world, I know there's some offshoots. Give it a try. Maybe it was just me that it didn't work for. Next up, I read one of my other favorite books of the year. So the square is Stranger in a Strange Land. Read a book that deals with being a foreigner in a new culture. The character or characters, if there are a group, must be either visiting or moving in as a minority. So hard mode is the main character is an immigrant or a refugee. For this, I read Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. So this had me hooked from the very beginning. Like my heart rate was increasing as I was reading the first chapter. Never let me go from the opening lines. The world building was rich and immersive. The magic system was very unique and just, I loved it. The tensions that it built in a way that just like was very complex, and it was impossible to put down for me. So it was gripping and easily earned 5 stars for me. And it's a standalone, so everything wraps up really nicely. I've since picked up M.L. Wong's Sword of Kaigen because I've heard that it's very similar in the fact that it is a standalone that gets you hooked and really just like draws you in. Row 5, I loved this one. Recycle a bingo square. So use a square from a previous year. They started doing our fantasy bingo in 2015, so you had a whole plethora to choose from. It can't be a repeat one that is on the current card, so you can't have 2 of the same squares. Hard mode is you do this hard mode from the original square. So for this, I pulled from the 2018 Our Fantasy. It was translated, it was a work of translated fantasy or science fiction, and hard mode was that it was written by a female author. And I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. So this is a translated work of fantasy fiction that was originally written by a woman. It was a haunting, thought-provoking novella, it was another short one, that really kept me thinking. It was stark and mysterious and fascinating, and it really did make me want to talk with other people about it. But again, it was another book where we didn't really get answers, and I wanted answers. I wanted a story that kind of told me what was going on, or told me a little bit more, like let me at least give me some information that will help me draw my own conclusions. I don't regret reading it, but it had been hyped up a lot, so I was expecting a little bit more from it personally. Next up, cozy sci-fi or fantasies. Cozy is up to your preference for what you find comforting, but the genre typically features relatable characters, low stakes, minimal conflict, and a happy ending. So the hard mode is that the author is new to you. I read The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. It was a pleasant, cozy read. It was almost a little too cozy for me. The main character's conflict really didn't feel heavy enough. It was so low stakes that I didn't understand all of the drama that was going on. But I am intrigued enough by the world that I am gonna pick up The Enchanted Greenhouse. I've already bought it. Sarah Beth Durst was a new author to me, so this did fulfill hard mode. I liked her writing enough that I think I'm gonna enjoy The Enchanted Greenhouse more. So if you've been keeping track, that means I've completed 13 out of 25 of the squares so far. So I'm over 50%, even though we're only 50% of the way through the year. So now let's talk about what I plan to read. This I'm gonna make quick because I haven't read them, so I don't know what I think of them. month. So let me know if you think these are good choices for some of the books that I plan to read. Back to row 1. My next planned read, which I hope to read this month actually, in the month of September, is a book published in the 80s. So read a book that was first published anytime between 1980 and 1989. Hard Mode is that is written by an author of color. So right now what I have on deck to read is Mort by Terry Pratchett. This is part of the Discworld series. This is going to be my first foray into the Discworld series. It was definitely written in the 80s. I can't remember exactly when. I want to say it was like 1987, but don't quote me on it. So this is just a book that follows Death as a character. Next up from this row is The High Fashion Square. Read a book where clothing, fashion, or fiber arts are important to the plot. This can be a crafty main character or a setting where fashion itself is explored. So Hard Mode is the main character makes clothes or fibers. I did read the Crimson Moth duology, which would technically reach this criteria, but I want to challenge myself for Hard Mode. So my plan is to read This Woven Kingdom and see if I like that series. Okay, last up on the first row is Down with the System. Read a book in which the main plot revolves around disrupting a system. And Hard Mode is it's not a governmental system. This sounds like it should be easy. I think what's making me overthink it is the hard mode part, the not a governmental system. For a while I was like, oh, I'll read The Will of the Many, but I know that that's probably going to be a governmental system. So I think I'm going to read Babel by R.F. Kuang, which let me know if that's going to meet hard mode criteria. I know there is a system that is being disrupted, and I don't think it's a governmental system. But if I read it and find out that it's not, I just don't meet hard mode. Next row, I've got Last in a Series. Read the final entries in a series. So hard mode is the series is 4 or more books long. I've technically already met this. I've finished a lot of duologies. I have some trilogies I'm probably going to finish up. But honestly, I'm trying to see if I can get hard mode on this. I don't have any specific plans for this one yet, but I'm not worried about it. Moving on. Author of color. Read a book written by a person of color. Hard mode is to read a horror novel written by an author of color. I plan on reading Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham, which he is a Native American author, and I'm pretty excited. I know some other people that have read it and really enjoyed it. Small press or self-published is my next square that I need to fulfill. Read a book published by a small press. So not one of the big 5 publishing households, or that is self-published. And then hard mode for this is it has under 100 ratings on Goodreads or is written by a marginalized author. I don't believe I'm going to fulfill hard mode for this one. So for this square, I plan to read Morgan Stang's Murder at Spindle Manor, which I have on my Kindle already. Next row, I believe. An LGBTQIA protagonist. So this is a book where a main character is under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. Hard mode is the character is marginalized on at least one additional axis. So they could either be a person of color, disabled, member of an ethnic, religious, or cultural group that is marginalized. I have 2 books that I plan to read that could meet this criteria. I believe both, maybe only one of them meets hard mode. Either The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez or A Sorcery of Small Magics by Maiga Ducey. So those are I plan to read both of them, but as long as I read at least one of them. I believe The Spear Cuts Through Water is the one that fulfills hard mode. Okay, so originally I was worried about this next square. 5 science fiction fantasy short stories. Short stories are not my jam. Any science fiction fantasy short story, as long as there are at least 5 of them. Hard mode is to read an entire anthology or collection. So I was worried about this one, but then I was poking around on my Kindle and I saw that through Kindle Prime, like Amazon Prime, there is a short story series called Into the Shadow, and it has a lot of authors that I really enjoy. It has way more than 5, that's for sure. So I'm gonna give those a try, and if I don't fulfill hard mode, if I do 5 and that's really all I can do, then I'm okay with that. So that's my plan for the short story collection. Those should be pretty quick. All right, last but not least, row 5, generic title square. I think this one's funny. Read a book that has one or more of the following words in the title: blood, bone, broken court, dark shadow, song, sword, or throne, and you can use them pluralized. Hard mode is that the title contains more than one of those listed words, or contains at least one of those words, and a color color, number, or animal, real or mythical. For this, I plan on reading One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. So this would fulfill hard mode because it has one and dark. Another option that I threw out there was Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranek, but I'm leaning towards One Dark Window because I really want to see. Everybody talks a lot about Rachel Gillig's first duology since she's come out with the Night and the Moth series. The next square is actually not a book. So this is do something new besides reading a book. Watch a TV show, play a game, learn how to summon a demon. That's what it says on here. I don't plan on doing that. So spend some time with fantasy, science fiction, or horror in any other format. I'm not worried about this. There's a lot of things that I could count for this. Hard mode would be to write a post and review it on the R Fantasy subreddit. I probably won't do that, but I haven't really claimed one thing for this or another because I do a lot of this already. And then last but not least, pirates. Read a book where characters engage in piracy. Hard mode is it's not a seafaring pirate. So this is why I didn't count Amina Al-Sarafi in this, because I wanted to try to meet hard mode criteria. So for this, I plan to read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I believe this will fulfill hard mode, and it gives me an opportunity to try some Sanderson in not quite such a scary thick tome, although this is still like a decently sized book. So I would say the one square that I am worried about is back up on the first row. You may have noticed I have not said anything about the Hidden Gem square. So this is a book with under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. So new releases and arcs from popular authors do not count. That's what's killing me. Follow the spirit of the square. And then hard mode is that it was published more than 5 years ago. So I'm not even going to try to do hard mode on this. I'm really struggling to find some hidden gems, at least on my Goodreads TBR. Right now, my plans are to potentially swap this square out. There's a lot of old squares that I want to fulfill. So one of the options would be to swap it out with reading a book where the witches are the main protagonist. I recently picked up Slewfoot by Brom, which is a book that I really want to check out. There's also a square about reading a book that has been adapted into a TV series or a movie series, and Mickey 7 is another book that I want to read, and my husband really wants to watch the movie because he's heard some good things about it. Some other options, I could do Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil for books with vampire protagonists. There's also A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Mandana, which would meet criteria for a title with 4+ words in it. There's a lot of great prompts from the past that I might want to swap this out for. I tend to like to read things that rate well, and I tend to not like books when they don't rate well on Goodreads. Most of the books that I have on my list are books that more than 1,000 people have already read and rated. I don't know what that says about me. That's my R Fantasy Bingo check-in. I've got a really good start on my card. I'm really proud of the work that I've done. I'm feeling really confident about being able to finish the challenge. Maybe not in hard mode, but it really is a great way to discover new books and new authors. So I highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't already. It's not too late to start fulfilling your card. You can backlog books that you've been keeping track of and reading. So thank you so much for watching. Sorry my mom's not here. She'll be in the next video. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe so you can make sure you find our new content as soon as it's posted. And don't forget to let me know in the comments what's on your bingo card, or what should I add that I haven't added already.